Good afternoon to our grower colleagues in Australia. I'm Peter Allderman from Topfruit in South Africa. I had the privilege of hosting a certain Mr. Nick Finger, a consultant then working in New Zealand and now based in Australia, and hopefully a few of you know him. A few years back, we had a very interesting time looking at what we were doing, producing our apples and pears in South Africa. When Apple had the great idea to host its Pear Masterclass virtually, Nick put us into contact, so thank you very much. Well, much of what we're going to be discussing is not news to most of you. Hopefully some of our approaches may prove to be interesting. Just a brief background to South African pear industry. It's just under 13,000 hectares with around 18 million trees. So that's a very low planting density of about 1,400 trees a hectare. Just over half of those hectares, 7,000, are 16 years and older, but pears do last a little longer. Packham's Triumph is our biggest variety at about a third, Forelle at about 27%, Boncretion or Williams at 18%, and then Abate Fetel at 5% leads the minor varieties. Looking at the nursery tree numbers over the past 5 years, Packham's Triumph and Forelle are going to increase proportionally of the area planted, and Abate Fetel is going to decline. No new variety has really made its presence felt yet. The one with the highest number of hectares is Cheeky at 560 hectares. We have 15 production regions listed in the Hortgrow statistics, but the top 6 have 91% of the trees. So essentially we have 6 production areas. All my figures that I've got here are from the website hortgrow.co.za. There's going to be a tab for statistics or /statistics, and you can get it there. Our total production is 438,000 tonnes. So our average yield is 34 tonnes a hectare, so we've got a way to go. Of that crop, 50% is exported, 35% is processed, and 13% is sold locally. With me, I've got Christo Stradom, a technical advisor from Wolfpack in Wolseley. Willie Kotze from Dutoy Group, he's the technical advisor there. Vernon Bassett, who's the farm manager looking after this block here. Heinrich Kemp from CFG, leading pear and apple company in the co-op here. Graham Krieger from Fruitmax Agri, he's the technical advisor for the Tourday Group. And then Hamis Haman, also of CFG. We're going to discuss the questions that APAL put to us generically, so we don't cover everything again. And then we're going to look at the differences in the growth habits and bearing habit of the varieties that we've chosen, which are Forelle, Abate Fetel and Packham's Triumph, and look at how these different growth habits affect everything. So if we can just jump into the questions that we're going to go for. The first question we want to look at generically, sort of a helicopter view, is how do pear growers in South Africa set their crop goals? What are the crop goals? Is it quality, yield? What are the targets? Maybe Heinrich?
Okay, from our point of view, everything starts with quality, and it starts from the market side. So the market takes what they want. So on Forelle is a blast pear variety, so color is very important there, and also fruit size. We want at least a peak count of count 70 or 80. And then on Abate Fetel, it's a green pear, but we export it to Europe, and they want big fruit. They want to count 60 and bigger. So we aim for maximum fruit size there. And then on Packham's, you also want a average size like a count 70. We don't want too big fruit again. So that's what the market wants, and that's what we carry back to the producer, so they can decide how to produce it.
Great. I just want to add into that question there, Vernon. Obviously you got some ideas as to the information that you get from the co-op. How do you assess your crop goals, and how do you do it?
Well, it's obviously we all here for profit, making money, but it's a balance. Your tree shape and size and plant width all plays a factor on the tonnage you want to get, but with the size, color as your main goals, sunlight is important. So you can't go for 100 tons on Forelle. On this block we are today, we've been averaging 65 tons with 90% pack out and about a 60% Forelle. So this is where we feel is for this orchard is the balance between size, profit, colour.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vernon. Okay, so then the next question we've got is, what are we doing as South African growers with tree structure, pruning and managing fruiting wood, just overall over general varieties, and then light manage to achieve these harvest goals? And Graham, if you could tackle that one, please.
Thank you, Peter. I think whether you're farming Forelle or Packhams or Abate Fetel or apples or most fruit types for that matter, when it comes to tree structure, there's two very important things that growers need to focus on. And the one is filling your space with a young orchard adequately so that you intercept enough light. And secondly, to maintain yields and quality to get adequate light distribution throughout the canopy. So the advice would be to grow the tree before you focus on high yields, and also manage the light throughout the canopy so that the focus remains very strongly on quality. I think it's important to realize that in South Africa we focus with pears very strongly on the export market. We aim to export as many of the fruit we produce as possible, and for that we need the quality.
Then the next question we've got is, how do growers meet what consumers want? So again, I think I'm going to refer to you as the farm manager here, Vernon.
Like I said, this block we're talking about Forelle, on the figures I said earlier, about the first 65 tons on Forelle. Your rootstock is BP1 on this block. It's 4.5 by 1.5 planting. We'll go to the trees and see the framework. Like Graham said, light is important. There's a balance in your tree. But getting to those targets, what I didn't say is our average is about 42% of our fruit is to count 70 and bigger. And what Heinrich said is the criteria. We found that that's a very good balance for this farm with the tonnage we're getting and the quality we're getting. And at the end of the day, income per hectare is working quite well. You can go down now to 50 tons for a bigger fruit, but I'll beat you at the end of the day in a total sum. So every farm will have to make his area, sunburn more, growth is more, what's your strategy, and timing of all the different actions is the most important thing. It's critical.
Okay, great. And then we all know that the market in Europe this year, which is one of our main markets, has had frost, and there's going to be an opportunity in the market. So I'm not too sure who I'm going to ask this question to, but anyone who wants to jump in. How does the market outlook for the year affect what we're going to be looking at now in the individual trees and the growing strategy and thinning strategy? Willie?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, like I said, most of the guys have confirmed here, we've got some set goals where we want to go with size and quality. So deviating from that to take some opportunities in the market can have a big influence on the quality we actually produce. And especially if we look at fruit size and color, where the market opportunities lies, it's very risky to deviate from what we do at the moment, and sacrificing quality in that stage wouldn't be advisable.
Yeah, Peter, I agree with Willie, because I think the point is pear growers in South Africa are export orientated, and the quality standards for export, that they don't really change. So maybe the interpretation of the standard might change in the market, but that's not something we can decide now here in an orchard around full bloom. So the focus must still be on producing as many Class 1 export pears per hectare as you can. And that stays the same whether the market is full or whether the market is empty. In fact, it's probably more important when the market is full. Yeah. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, cool.
The old way was always tons per hectare, but we all starting to think, no, how many export cartons per hectare? Because our pears are export.
Okay, we are standing here in the farm Eselfontein in the Ceres area in the Warm Bokkeveld. This is a Forelle orchard. It's planted in 2005, planting distance 4.5 by 1.5 meters. Yeah, it is important for every area. The soil, the climate is different. Graham, what would your advice be for a tree of this age in this area?
Thank you, Amis. I think what's important here is that we are at 4.5 meters on a relatively strong rootstock with a relatively vigorous sign variety. My advice would be to go for a central leader tree with a three-dimensional canopy, branches positioned around the leader, and the reason would be that that's at 4.5 meters the best way to intercept enough light to give you sustainably high yields. At 4.5 meters, you don't really want to go to a two-dimensional canopy because you will sacrifice your yields over time. What is very important then is that you need to maintain light throughout the canopy. So it's important that the branches, if you take the trunk as your primary wood and you say the branches off the primary wood is your secondary wood, it's important that they are spaced at least 40 to 60 centimeters from each other to allow the sunlight to penetrate the whole canopy. And on Forelle, that's especially important in the first 2 to 3 months after full bloom.
Yeah, you said the space between the branches must be 40 to 60 centimeters to accept the sunlight, and that is mainly especially for the Forelle, to give to get good Forelle color, to have class 1 cartons for the export market. Except for the spacing and to accept sunlight in the trees, what else would you do with branch manipulating, leaf removal on the trees, and other technical advice that you might have for a grower in this area to get better color on his Forelle fruit?
Thank you, Amis. I think something that most growers in the world do is we do a lot for fruit set, and then we get a whole lot of fruit which we quickly try and thin down to a commercial crop. The thinning early and effectively gives you better fruit size, and that holds true for most crops. In this case, there's a brilliant set now. It's just a few days after full bloom, and you can already see that the young fruitlets are turning red as the anthocyanin is accumulating. And usually in the case of Forelle, that means the fruitlet is set. So I would guess very soon, in the next 10 to 14 days, Vernon will get a thinning team in here, and they will focus on removing the smaller fruitlets in the bunches. He will do his fruit counts. He will know from his co-op what the target yields, and from the history of the orchard is. Vernon knows what kind of fruit size he can expect here, and that will give him a fruit load per tree. As you can see, Forelle is bearing predominantly on spurs, either on the secondary wood. This is a nice young branch, 3 years old, but also even on the older wood, it's predominantly on spurs, and the growers contain the vegetative growth within what we call roughly a shear's length of the secondary wood to maintain adequate light on the spurs, but also on the young fruitlets. It's very important that your fruiting wood must also stay young, and the vitality of the fruiting wood is very important for crops year on year crops on Forelle. It all boils down to light. So Amis, to answer your question about what would I do now, and I know it differs from area to area, if I can just maybe look at a bunch where the blossom was maybe a few days earlier, let's say the advice would be to go to 2 fruit on this spur. I would actually remove all the inferior ones. I'm focusing on the size of the fruitlet already. I'm also already focusing on the intensity of the red color on the fruitlet. On Forelle, the synthesis of anthocyanin, which is the red color pigment, outweighs the degradation in the first 2 to 3 months. So it's important to get light onto those fruitlets. During the thinning action, I actually also remove 1 or 2 leaves that are shading the little fruitlets. It's important, don't remove all the spur leaves. That's the factory, especially early during cell division. But thinning and accurate thinning now is very important for not only this year's crop, but also the following season's crop. On Forelle, you also want to space the fruit. You want to have spurs that are not bearing this year so that they can rest and bear in the following season.
I think what we must tell the audience as well is that in South Africa, especially in our warmer areas where we have less winter chilling, that we do struggle with too much vegetative growth. So in future, I think the plantings of Forelle on BP1 rootstock, on the pear rootstock will be less and less, and we will definitely do more plantings on the more precocious rootstocks like the quinces. Now in South Africa, the leading one currently is quince BA29, and we also have quince C51, and we already can see the orchards that was planted on those two rootstocks. We get less vegetative growth, and we get more better quality fruit buds. If you have a situation where you have too much vegetative growth, and I want to congratulate this man on what he achieved in this orchard, if you have too much vegetative growth, then you have in pears, unfortunately, only a few tools to control that vegetative growth. And the one tool is less pruning, because we know pruning stimulates vegetative growth, and the other one is girdling of the trees. So we use girdling as a tool in the warmer areas where we have more vegetative growth. We use girdling very extensively to control the vigor of the trees and to get better fruit bud formation for the next year, better fruit set and better fruit quality. In terms of the tree structure, I totally agree with you. On these planting distances, we aim at a central leader, a dominant central leader with side branches well spaced, and on the side branches we want our bearing units. And I always say to my growers, you don't want a leader on a leader, so take out the strong branches. I don't want a branch on a branch, so take out the branches or the side branches that becomes too strong on the branches, and the same applies to the bearing units. I want to have simple bearing units where I can bear my fruit.
Okay, Graham and Christy's got the fruit shape, but practically it's basically six, for every meter there's 6 branches. So we, and roughly it's 80% tree height compared to tree width. And I'm going for about 24 branches per tree at this stage. I would like to bring that down a little bit more, but it's a process. And on each branch, if you do the sums correctly, averaging a count 70, when thinning out, you're looking at 240 pairs you want on this tree, which means 10 trees per branch. But you have smaller branches, bigger branches. So you play with those sums, and that's basically how you get to your target. But the shape and the placement of the fruit buds with your bearing units on your branches and the stage, how old they are, is important, when to renew and when to bring in new ones. A Forelle tree wants to grow on the top, and you can see on this tree, I think they'll take photos later, on this tree we've continuously using ropes, manipulation to bring in new branches, which they grow like this. If you don't use the rope to bring them down into the position, you'll never get your tree where you want it. It's an ongoing yearly process where you never stop by Forelle. I think you two know this as well. The light on the top is where we've started 6 years ago with fixing the tree, and now we on this orchard we're averaging in the last 5 years 67 tons on target on tonnage. Our size has been 61 tons of that was class 1 fruit. Only 5.6 tons was juice. So this is a very productive, profitable orchard, but it's been taking 6 years to get here. And the pears never stop. Next year, again, renew, shape, do the cuttings on the right time. Like I said earlier, light is important, so it's a process. You can see those thick branches on this tree and compared to the branches on these trees. As you can see, the big difference is we've started renewing on them. So next year I'm going to cut off that thick one there, because I've got some in their place already, and I keep building, and that's basically the process.
Yeah, I think what changed quite a bit the last couple of years, I think there was some years ago we believed that you can bear fruit and that old spur system year after year after year, and we could see that the fruit size declined due to the age of the old spurs. And I think there's more tendency nowadays to renew not only branches but also bearing wood on the branches to make sure that we bear fruit on younger bearing wood that gives you better fruit bud quality and better fruit size.
And this is the new branch we're talking about. You can see we had to pull him down with rope in a position where there's space. So this branch will later, this one might go in 2 years time. So we keep renewing in the tree.
We are still on Eselfontein in Vernon's orchard, and this time it is Abate Fetel, also on BP1, also 4.5 by 1.5. This orchard was planted in 2008, and the last 5 years the average yield is 56 tons to the hectare, of which only 7% went directly to juice off the farm, achieving excellent Class 1 export packouts of 82%. Now, as Heinrich has alluded to earlier already, one of the most important things on Abate Fetel is Class 1 export cartons of excellent fruit size. So, Willie, maybe you can shed some light on how growers would go about achieving that on Abate Fetel.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, I think looking at the stats at the moment, Peter shared some fairly horrible stats in the beginning of average of the industry. But I think we've come a long way in the production of Abate Fetel over the past few years. Looking at some of our averages at the moment of the Abate Fetel in our group, we can easily achieve between 60 and 70 tons per hectare on an annual basis. And our main goal here is to produce fruit that's larger than 70 millimeters because of the big price difference we get in Europe. And in the last 2 or 3 seasons, we've managed to produce about 70% of the fruit on tree within that fruit class. So I think that's fairly well. We can maybe have a look at the tree at the moment. Christo, is there something you would like to add?
Well, I think one of the bigger mistakes, and unfortunately we can't turn around, that Abate Fetel in South Africa is the one variety cultivar that I think that you definitely have to plant in a quince rootstock. In my view, there is a huge difference in production potential, fruit shape and fruit size between the quince rootstocks and the pear rootstocks, which we use BP1. And we just get better productions, we get better fruit size. So that's the start for me. All new plantings have to be on a quince rootstock. And obviously when you do quince rootstock, you have to put in a more formal trellis system. And then from there you must just manage your tree basically the same as what we did at the Forelle. Have its dominant central leader, have branches well spaced, and manage your fruiting wood.
Yeah, I think if we can jump into the tree and show a little bit of what we need to do. I think
I just want to say this is now a wrong rootstock actually, BP1. So we're struggling with the figures Graham said is to get 60 to 70 tons because we're struggling with the size aspect. So when you're looking at the markets, I have to go lower in tonnage with this rootstock, where Chris obviously pointed out BA29, you can go to higher tonnage per hectare.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. As far as I understand it, one of the most important inputs on Abate Fetel is the correct usage of pruning and also at the right time. So Willie and Christo, maybe you guys can shed some light on that, looking at the branches at the tree and at the fruiting wood.
Yeah. I think Abate Fetel size comes down to the production of fruit on the right wood. And like I said earlier on in the Forelle, is we've had a tendency to keep bearing on spurs on spurs on spurs. And over time we lost the juvenility of those spurs. And with that we saw a big decline in fruit size, and we tried to correct that by lowering the crop yields. But as soon as we changed the way we pruned the Abate Fetel, we immediately got out of that issue. So starting off, normally we would remove anything on the branch that's outside the 1:3 ratio. And you can see that some bigger cuts have been made here in the past where they've removed stuff that was growing too strong. And from that we get some renewal growth, and we will start to get some renewal 1-year-old shoots on a branch like this. This is typically where they've removed something that was too strong, and we get a nice 1-year-old shoot that's with that. If we get more than 1-year-old shoot, we will normally single that with summer pruning. We'll take away some of the excessive shading, and we'll single the bearing habit into a single one. And then we will wait for it to spur up in the second year. And in the year 2 we will cut back into nice thick bearing wood on the Abate Fetel. Try to keep it to the side of the branch where we don't have rub marks of the fruit hanging on directly onto the bearing wood, but also not onto the branch, and also trying not to get the fruit with the odd shaped necks hanging straight upside down. But this is basically what it comes down to, is producing fruit on 2 and 3 year old wood and cutting back into that wood and removing some of the older bearing wood that we have on the tree. And this we can do by removing some of the older spurs that we don't need, but also making renewal cuts of the previous season's stuff. And in this way we can always renew the way that we have the branch. It's basically the old 1, 2, 3 pruning recipe, where you have 1 year coming up, 2nd year spurring up, cutting back, perhaps a 3rd year cutting back again if it gets thinner, and then remove it completely once it gets into the diameter outside the ratio. So probably next year this one will be removed, but together with that also removing all the weaker spurs that will give you poor quality wood in this case.
The point that you made is that you must make sure that your bearing wood must be young. 1 year old shoots, leave them, spur, cut back into the fruiting wood, as you said, even the 3rd year, and then renew after that to get that new growth again. By removing the bearing units that's too thick, obviously you make a few cuts, you also can get new growth, and that's exactly what you want. You want to renew the bearing wood all the time, to cut into that spurs. I think one important thing that we must say, sometimes you get long spurred units. Don't be greedy and cut back to 6 or 7 spurs, go back to 3 or 4 spurs.
Yeah.
The deeper you cut, the better your fruit set, the better the fruit size.
Exactly. I think it's one of the stuff where light also plays a role. What we've seen in previous years, if the tree architecture is not exactly correct, we lose a lot, we get a lot of blind wood at the back of the branches. So taking out the branches that's too thick, and also taking out, make sure that we get some light into those branches. We always get the renewal, you don't end up with the blind wood, and you balance excessive vigor with balanced vigor to keep the productivity of the tree going.
Thank you guys. I think we have now in the Forelle and here mentioned, if we would plant this orchard again, we would consider quince rootstocks with a decent support system. But we have BP 1 year now, and this orchard is doing very well, but with the right inputs at the right time. So maybe if one of you could allude to the timing of the pruning, how that would be influenced in more vigorous orchards, and maybe the girdling as well.
Well, definitely in a more vigorous orchard on a BP1 rootstock, you will prune later, closer to bloom, and then obviously use girdling as a tool to get more fruit buds, to get better return bloom, get better fruit buds for next year, you get better set, you get better fruit size. We must control the vigor. Yes, you want new growth, but you don't want a vigorous orchard. You must remember there's a balance. So we want the new growth to get new bearing units, but we mustn't run into a situation where you have too much vigor and you don't have the fruit buds.
The guys are also sees the fruit buds easier for cutting back. If you do it a little bit later in season, you can see where the buds have started to swell, and you get that early stage of flowering, and they can make the cut exactly there's no more guessing, and you can make the cut exactly above the flower bud to make sure that you put it in the dominant position. There's no competition of excessive shoot growth proximal to it, and that gives you the fruit size.
Another point that we can raise obviously at this point is the importance of pollination. We know with most fruit, pears, and especially Abate Fetel, the more seed I have in the fruit, the better my fruit size, and the better the set. So most of our orchards are a mixed orchard where we've planted Abate Fetel and Forelle in the same orchard. Rows of Forelle, rows of Abate Fetel, get in a lot of bees, get the seeds into the fruit. It does give you better fruit set and better fruit shape. We don't want these long, thin Abate Fetel. You want something that's nice, big and fat. That is what the market looks for. And by using the right rootstock, the right pruning method, pollination, I believe we can achieve it.
One last question to you. Would you be considering, when you replant new orchards, obviously you're going to be using BA29, but would you be considering a formal trellis system, or are you happy with this kind of unsupported, maybe a little bit of a light trellis to support your leader and the bud union. But would you be going for a formal system? Are you thinking of capital intensifying your plantings in future?
We must with a BA29 we want to go for either a good trellis or sometimes support system, because where the rootstock meet with the Abate, it's not a strong joint for a young tree, so you have to support with Abate. Forelle on Abate, same story. So anything with the twins I'll put on the trellis system. BP1s we've done some Packhams now and rosemary without any trellis.
Okay, but that would be a light trellis, and you're still going to have a round tree, or are you going to have a two-dimensional tree and move your row width a bit closer?
On the pears, on this farm we've decided on pears 4 by 1.5 is the best for our type of soil. If you have a weaker soil, stronger soil, the depth of your top layers, that will influence your decision to go narrow. I know Billy and them are maybe going closer, but yeah, we decided on the 4 by 1.5 is the best for this farm.
I think that is the important thing. Growers need to know their own conditions very well. For instance, in the area where I do most of my work, we would never, even on a 4.5 by 1.5 BP1, consider planting a freestanding tree, and it's because it's a much more windy area. So it's important that you must marry the scion, the rootstock, the soil type and your conditions with what you are trying to achieve. In our area, Peter, to also answer you, we are definitely going to a more higher density situation. And then depending on the variety, it will be either two-dimensional or three-dimensional canopy. On something like a Forelle, if your tractor row alley width is narrow enough, you can achieve high yields with fruit quality with a two-dimensional canopy, and that's very beneficial for fruit color. It makes something like the leaf removal that I did earlier in the piece, it makes it unnecessary, and that's an unnecessary labor cost, and it's a costly exercise if you don't need to do it. But on a Abate Fetel or another green pear, I'm an advocate of sticking to a three-dimensional, more spindle type tree, even at higher densities. We're back, and we've moved on to Packham's Triumph Orchard, still in the Warmbokkenveld in the vicinity of Ceres. And we are now on Vadersgawe, where the farm owner is Ian Verseld. Ian, thank you very much for having us here. I must say it's a lovely orchard, and we'll get to the data later, but allow me to say it's been averaging just over 100 tons to the hectare for 3 years running now, which I think is a brilliant achievement, and thanks for having us. Just to have a general discussion on Packham's Triumph, I think I'll ask Hamis. Hamis, just tell us a bit about what the market wants, our marketers want for Packham's, and what we are looking for.
Yeah, fortunately we are in the privileged position where we know there's a huge export market for green pears, but it must be of class 1 quality. And then luckily, Graham, we also have a local market and the Africa market for our, we call it second grade, a class 1.5 grade fruit that we can send to our local markets and our Africa market. So that is why you can put 100 tons on an orchard like this, because there will be a market for all the pears. And then mainly, the bigger counts, you can have accounts on the tree from 56 millimeters up to 80 millimeters, and you will find a house for those kind of pears. Where our bigger pears will go to Europe, and then you also send pears to the Middle Far East, and like I've mentioned, the lower class grade we will send to the local market and to Africa.
Peter mentioned earlier today that Packham's, in terms of hectares, is the most planted variety in South Africa, which means there's a lot of volume to sell. But maybe just comment on the storability and the marketing window of Packham's.
Yeah, luckily Packham is a variety that you can keep in a CA cold store for up to 8 to 10 months. with good quality. You must put good quality in the cold store to get good quality out at the end, but it can store for up to 9 to 10 months, and then you want a good quality out of the CA store that you can market later in the year, when our local market is out of pears and the eastern market is out of pears. Before the northern hemisphere come in, you can market those fruit in those markets, and you get quite good returns on those fruit.
Thank you, Amis. And of course, that quality starts in the orchard with the orchard structure. Christo, there's very few people in the world who has more experience about Packhams, in my opinion, than you do. So maybe comment on the tree structure you're looking for on Packham's Triumph, how we achieve these goals that Amir has spoken about.
I think first we must say that, in my view, Packhams is a commodity, meaning you're not going to achieve the same income per kilo than like a Forelle or Abate Fetel. So in my view, the main driver should be to have the tree structure and do your pruning according to get as high as possible production. So tons per hectare is the main driver with good quality fruit. To get high tons per hectare, you need a good factory. You need tree row volume. And this is exactly what we see here with Ian. We have a fantastic factory here. The tree height is very even. The tree row, the width of the trees, the depth of the trees. So it's a fantastic factory that we have here. So we can chase now production. But to have the right structure, we have to start with, and this planting distance, again, I think this is 4.5 by 1.5, Ian?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
We start with a dominant central leader, with side branches with the right crotch angles, sort of flattish. We don't want too much upright wood, and well spaced, obviously, to get the sunlight. That's the same with the other varieties that we discussed this morning. So we need the sunlight into the tree, and then more importantly for me is the management of the fruiting wood. And very often we see that growers tend to, in my view, they prune it wrong. This is typically a 1-year-old shoot that has grown last season, and we know Packhams can blossom quite a bit on 1-year-old shoots, but we don't want that fruit. That is the fruit that will move around in the wind, and you get more rub marks. And we know it's the smaller fruit, and we also not always get good set on the 1-year-old shoots. So this is definitely not the reason why you leave it. So we leave these 1-year-old shoots, the growth of last season, unpruned to spur, meaning that we have to get these lateral buds to break sufficiently to form a spur, a flower bud for next year. And then the coming winter, next winter, we come and we cut into this fruiting wood. And there you get better set, you get better fruit size, it's cleaner fruit. And here I think I see one that is typically cut back into the fruiting wood. My experience is that growers are sometimes too sensitive and they remove too many 1-year-old shoots in the winter. Especially the upright thing worries them very much. Very often you will find in winter not all 1-year-old shoots spur. So if you're going to thin your 1-year-old shoots the previous winter, how do you know which one is going to spur the best? You know nothing. So I say leave rather a bit more 1-year-old shoots. Even if they're upright. As Billy mentioned earlier, you get a tip fruit, often it will bend horizontal, and then it's anyway not upright anymore. So leave a little bit more 1-year-old shoots, let them spur. Next winter you can remove the excessive ones that didn't spur, and you can open your tree like that. And you cut into the fruiting wood, and that you do maybe it's in year 3 and even year 4, but very important, we have to follow this 1, 2, 3 method. We have to renew the bearing wood, leave the 1-year-old shoot again, let it spur, cut back into the fruiting wood and get the fruit set. And that is where you get your better fruit set, your better size and your better quality fruit. This is typically what we do when we prune the Packham tree. We leave the 1-year-old shoots, meaning a shoot that has grown the previous summer. We leave unpruned. You can see the grower has cracked that 1-year-old shoot to give it a better chance to spur. The shorter and thinner 1-year-old shoots we left uncracked, unpruned, and then if we have spurs in the second year, like this unit here, we cut back into the spurs. There is cut back into the spurs, and we know on a Packham that is where you get your production, your good quality fruit, and obviously better set. So this is and we try to get the bearing wood horizontal to have less wind marks as well. Packham has a lot of blossom. So by cutting back into that fruiting wood, you do get better spurs because you have less blossom competition.
Thank you, Christo. Before we go on, maybe we can chat a bit about this specific orchard. So Ian, I'll ask you some questions. You mentioned it's 4.5 by 1.5. Tell us, what is the rootstock?
It's on Caleriana rootstock, and the trees are now about 12 years, I think they're in 12 years now, 12 years old. And I really enjoy growing young trees. I really do. That's my passion, is getting that young little tree up into a big, proper, growing, bearing tree. And I concentrate a lot on getting the angles right of the branches. We do a lot of work in the beginning. We use little toothpicks, and then we go to a little bit of a longer stick, and then we do the ropes, the strings after that. And it's very important to have the angle. If you don't have the angle of the side branches correct, you seem to have too many straight up branches coming out and then giving you shadows. And if you have shadows or overshadowing, you lose fertility. And that's my biggest thing, is the tree, if you don't have sun on the eye is not going to bear you proper fruit. Growing the tree from a young age, controlling it and having your hand on it, as we would say in South Africa, keeping your hand on it is the most important thing for me. Even with stone fruit and all my other varieties, it's if the packhouse isn't a hospital, so if you don't supply the packhouse with good fruit, then the packhouse can't fix it.
I think that's very important. I mentioned earlier that this orchard has been averaging excellent yields of around 100 tons to the hectare, and very, very low cull in the orchard of an average of about 7% of the fruit from this orchard the last 3 seasons was culled for quality on the farm. What is the main reasons for cull on Packhams in this area?
Well, sunburn is our biggest problem. If you go to areas just other side of the mountain like Wolseley, they have a lot of wind. My microclimate has very little wind, but we get a lot of sunburn. And we went to the, Graham, you actually brought it up to me, is the option of doing a net, the drape net on it. And we put drape net over these 2 blocks, and the first year it was significantly better. I mean, I think I went from the normal rate of about a 50-60% class 1 pack out and 40% class 2 to 70% class 1 pack out and a 20% class 2 pack out. So it really helped me to put the orchard into a new range. Christo mentioned earlier that it's a commodity, but if you have a 100-ton hectare block that's now suddenly giving you 70-73% class 1 pack out, it suddenly turns from a commodity block into a very high yielding block, money wise. And we all farm to make money at the end of the day, but I think by doing small things extra like the nets, yes, it's expensive, but it absolutely pays you back within, I mean, I actually want to say maybe 2 to 3 years, the money's back in the bank and you've got the nets for another 5-6 years after that. So for me, the sunburn in our area is horrendous. I mean, it's really, out of a 100-ton block, if you had sunburn, I mean, we're talking about 30 tons that you're probably going to throw away just to sunburn, and that goes to juice. I mean, that doesn't even cover your costs on the orchard.
Maybe Hamish first. What do you think if you have to plant Packhams again here in the Warmbokkenveld? Why would you do it?
Well, in the Warmbokkenveld, first look at your microclimate, where you are, where your farm is situated, and then I think the only rootstock left for us is a BP1 or the quins. Unfortunately, there are other more vigorous rootstocks, but luckily on a Packham, it maybe not be that big disadvantage, because we look for a more vigorous tree, so that we can bear fruit and have the tonnage on those trees.
Thank you, Miss. Crystal, will you comment on the rootstocks for Packhams and the orchards that you would consider planting now?
I always say Packham tree must be a happy grower. There must be shoot growth. A Packham tree that doesn't have shoot growth, which is not a happy grower, you have smaller fruit, you have more russeting. So I actually prefer a tree that's a bit more vigorous. Not too vigorous, a bit more vigorous. Balance. And we know that the quince rootstocks is incompatible with Packhams, and we don't get the growth with the quince rootstock. So the main rootstock for us on Packhams will be BP1, or you can go the Colorana route, but the BP1 rootstock is the main one that we will use to get that extra vigor to build bearing units year after year, and to renew the tree. So as far as I'm concerned, BP1 is the number one.
Yes, I think in our area I would agree with that. Our experience with Packham Direct on quince is not a good experience. We get increased russet, less vigor, and actually malformed fruit as well. So the quinces that we have tried on Packham.
Okay, Willie, so what we've looked at is something quite different to what would be happening in Australia, because you've had some experience in your group with, switching over to more formal structures, and you might want to share that with us.
Yeah, if I have a look at what we've done in the apples in the past, you're exactly right. We come from a very informal system. This wasn't uncommon to see in the apples 10 years ago. We all planted like this. But I think there's a lesson to learn in the pears. We've mentioned some issues with rootstocks and incompatibility and fruit issues. And then we've also spoken about some rootstocks opportunities that we have, especially where we do see options with quince. I think there's some options to go on a higher density, more structured route. And I think the number one driver for us would be, except from the negative part where you have a lot of higher cost per hectare for establishment with a trellis system, but it's getting into a full crop earlier in the season. If we take this route, it's a very high productive orchard when it comes to full production. But the negative part of it is it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to get to this stage. And I think that's the opportunity that we are missing. And we're very successful growers once we get here, and we know how to do what we do. We've seen a lot of 4 meter wide and 4.5 meter wide orchards today. Once they get into full production, we are able to manage the light and we get the good fruit quality. But I think the real opportunity that we are missing out on is getting that earlier on. And I think we have some work to do on that. I think if we look at more formal structures on some of the blush color pears, there's definitely opportunity for us. We've seen some new technology being mentioned today. We've got the options of color improvement and ways to reduce sunburn. And I think there's some lessons to be learned for us. So definitely we would be looking into some, I know in our group we've started experimenting with that, and I know some of the other guys as well has been looking into that. So
great, thanks. And of course there's the running cost of the block becomes lower as well. Ian, thank you very much for allowing us. It's always a high risk proposition having people being critical about what you're doing. So really good that you could share this with us, and congratulations on a wonderful block and a wonderful yield. Right, thanks very much for having us, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.